Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Method in Madness. This is episode number 59. We took a break last week, but we are back again with a very, very interesting topic. Since the lockdown hit and children started doing school learning from home, many parents have kind of contemplated and considered learning at home or homeschooling, or maybe a combination of both. How effective or efficient or doable are alternative learning systems? To talk about that, we have with us Bachan Anand. Bachan is a facilitator at Bhoomi Community, and Bhoomi is in Kerala, Cochin. Bachan considers self-direction as an individual and self-organization as a group to be the most powerful tools we can use to move us closer to our purpose and vision. He has experience working with communities, corporate organizations, children, and parents across 15 and more countries using the tools and practices listed in his kitty. Most of his experience is in the US and in India. We are very, very happy to welcome Bachan to share his vision, his experiences in community learning and how we can look at alternative learning methods. Welcome, Bachan.
Thank you, Vaishali. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Just to let all our audience members know, Bachan and we are going to talk for the next 45 minutes, and then we are going to take your questions and comments. Please do join us in the conversation. If you're following certain ways that are a little not conventional, please do share that as well. Bachan, I thank you really very much for joining in this session. I have been working with children for a very long time. And somehow I always feel that, and because it is theater and drama, there's always a sense of being together as a community. And I myself have been a part of such a system since a very, very young age. And I know how powerful these systems are. Of late, during the lockdown, many parents gave this a thought. I'm a member on 2 Facebook groups on homeschooling, and I myself have seen a huge increase in the number of members in the span of 1 year in that group. So is community learning a facet of homeschooling? How is it different? Is it viable? There are lots of questions that I have in my mind, and of course, my audience over here, our audience over here. So we'll start with your experience and what is community schooling or learning?
Thank you, Vaishali. So community learning, is that something that's really important? I think that happens a lot. So the role that I play, and I use the word facilitator, is to create an environment where that learning becomes easy for an adult and children. So when we talk about community learning, it's not just about the child, it's about anyone who comes to the environment. So it can be an adult who is a parent, it can be an adult who is a community member, so it can be for anyone. And obviously homeschooling communities, unschooling communities, even regular school going children or families can benefit from that community learning, right? And for me, one of the main reasons why I decided to explore this more, and that too once we had children, was that the villages, the communities that was easily available when I was a child is not that available anymore, right? Either both parents are working, there are no joint families, or we are in cities where there's maybe some friendship that's developed, but there is no real work happening around us. Real work happen in offices, real work happen in very much factory like settings where it's not easily accessible to the child, right? So for anyone. So those are the reasons why I felt the need for community learning. Again, when I explored this journey, I did not have all the answers, and I am still figuring out things as we go, and that's the beauty of it, because it's not following a book, following a path, right? So from all that, we started Bhoomi in 2016. Initially, the idea was it'll be a kindergarten, but as children start growing earlier, the question came up: is it going to be school? Is it going to be not school? Unschooling? A lot of options came up, and from all that, we found that there is no one answer. So we decided to create a learning space. We call it as a learning community, and a space, families that are interested in learning together. And sometimes, if you choose learning to be from the book, that's okay. But I personally believe that there's less teaching is involved. There's been more learning always, and or
Mm.
no learning by doing. Those are some of the the approaches that I use. So not I use, so I facilitate when I'm in that space and outside. And sometimes once you start the journey, it's not, you cannot differentiate that this is how I would interact with children, this is how I would interact with adult. So it somewhat becomes across the board, and that's how we start approaching learning in any ways. That's it. So those are my
Yeah.
thoughts.
So it seems that it's a very exploratory sort of an approach where you're exploring with people in community. School somewhere, Bachan, gives us this confirmation or validation that yes, you are learning. So you come to school, you learn, and then it's taken care of. The moment school is not there as a building or as a concept, where you're giving books, you're doing exams, you're passing tests, somewhere the content of learning. So is it really that you have to go to a school and take an exam to study and pass some tests to feel that you're learning? How do you gauge your learning? How is the learning happening? How do you gauge that? School gives you that report card at the end of every year.
Yeah. So again, it's a great question, and it's really, I don't have all the answers, but again, we have to think for ourselves, right? Do we have to, let's say, people are on the call, assuming most of them are adults or young adults. Is that how we learn? Do we learn because there is exam? Do we learn because the book is given to us? Do we learn because there is syllabus? So I think that's where we have to answer. So if we answer to all of them that, okay, yes, I need to have, whether I'm in a job, I'm not doing it or running a business, if you need exams, if you need books, if you need all of that to learn, then then you have the answer. So so I think that's the best place. And you can also go back and look at, if you think, okay, yes, so suddenly we are adults, we know something more. uh, if you think that way, I don't know. But first, why don't I think we should all answer that ourselves. The other thing is that, how did the child start learning how to walk and talk? Was it again with books and exams and all? And I find that the more we are anxious for a child to walk or talk, they take a little bit more time to talk, is what I found, because our anxiety kind of drives their interest down or their intention down. So what I'm getting to is that yes, those are all tools that we created for someone to learn. The idea is that, okay, if we do all this, the someone, most of the case our child, or if you're a teacher, the students in your class will learn. Then we have to be always thinking about, okay, what would you do the same thing to yourself, right? So if you answer that, okay, so I think I made my point clear, right? So if you answer that, okay, you need books, you need exams, you need all the scorecards to learn yourself, then by all means apply that to anyone else, including a child, right? So that's the best I can answer, because I went to school, I wrote the exam, so I cannot go back and answer that question,
Undo it.
because yeah, undo it or not. No, but I found that through experience as an adult. But again, it's not my experience. When I do the same thing, because recently I tried to not try to rebuild a house, right? Whereas I'm an engineer, I never built anything, concrete, but I've passed all the exams. Whereas I did learn a lot in doing that. Now whether you call it architecture books, we did refer to documents. We had to refer sometimes to books. We had to draw our plans. All that happened, but that was all part of doing something. And for me, learning happened much beautiful than what happened in my college, right?
Right.
So, so
Right.
those are my thoughts.
So self-directed learning, Bachan, if you can just talk a little more about it, because there are a lot of these jargons like child-centric curriculum, curriculum led by the child, led by the teacher, then continued by the child or carried forward by the child. So if you can just talk a little bit about self-directed learning and how it has played a role in the children that engage with the Bhoomi community.
Yeah, so I think the self-directed learning, the word explains, it's directed by the self, directed from a need, right? An individual sees whether that the need can be because of being part of a community. The need can be to meet a very personal passion, right? But again, it's again coming from inside. So what I find is that when again, I think you asked me about how we are seeing the children. So I find that you don't need to do anything when it's self-directed learning. For example, my son, my daughter, right? They are interested in a lot of things. They're not interested in the same things, but none of things they're interested where because I told them that they need to do. I've tried teaching them maths because I love maths. I found that in the process of teaching them, again, my intention was to teach them maths, right? When that became, so then math became a subject, I found that they were not very interested. Whereas, and again, I don't even have textbooks or anything to teach with, even, but there is enough information out there, right? But then later I find that they have to use maths for things. For example, my daughter, she's a 9-year old. She does her accounting because we get some allowance. She spends it for something. So there, I'm sure that she has to figure out. She's not using a calculator. I see her sitting and writing. She comes and asks for questions. So again, self-directed learning happens best when you have a need and you're trying to pick up things for a need, right? So for me, again, that's how, again, even if it doesn't mean that it's child centric or not, it doesn't mean that adults should never teach children anything. It's always that when the learner is ready, the teacher will arrive and the teaching becomes much easier. So teaching is
Hmm.
not a bad thing, but teaching for the sake of teaching is different from teaching for supporting the learning needs, right? And
Right.
that's where, so at Bhoomi Community we have there was again, even though it actually started for, I would say, the wrong reason, that parents wanted some children to learn Malayalam or their children to learn Malayalam, and then when such requests come, because we are all important, right? So in this case, an adult genuine need to learn the language where you are, the place that you're growing up. So then we turned up and said, okay, is anyone available to teach? And so we had someone who is a retired teacher, who's a grandmother, who was ready to come in and do the teaching, and then children signed up for it, right? So and then did some children signed up, but I found in the process that after the second class, third class, there was no real interest. But then someone who is a grandmother, came into coming, people started coming and sitting in. That's not everyone. Thankfully, everyone did not just sign up and sit there for the sake of it. But whereas
Hmm.
there are a lot of other instances when the simple thing as cooking, when the direction was coming from the children that we want to make something, we want to make dosa, right? And even in making dosa, there is maths involved. You need to figure out, okay, how much of rice you need, how much of dal you need, right? All that stuff. So my
Hmm.
point, in those cases, then you never have to go behind anyone. So they're very much interested in doing it, and then they are ready to do the cooking. So there are a lot of similar things. So we do expose children to different things at Bhoomi because adults are doing things. Again, it's not exposed for the sake of showing them that they need to do it, but these are things that are relevant. Like one of the community members, he's into carpentry, so he sometimes holds sessions, and it's not that everyone has to sign up. People sign up. Once you sign up, then again there is a certain agreement that you need to have, because if someone is ready to do teaching, then you have to respect that time that other person is providing, and then you sign up. You sometimes have to go through 3 or 4 practical sessions or classes. So I think
Hmm.
all that comes in. So it's never that it's not about whether it's a child centric environment or an adult centric environment. It's about that uh, things are happening because there is some relevance, either because
Hmm.
it's practically applicable or because someone has a passion to it, or sometimes because we need to do it. For example, we had to clean up after our food every day, right?
Hmm.
So that's something that none of us love that part, or at least some of us don't love that part. But then we have an idea, so we found a solution. Again, that's where self-organization come in. So we found a solution that 2 people will take turn and start cleaning up, so that everyone doesn't need to do that every day. And in that, then it becomes, once you have an agreement, then it became uh, it's a self-organized environment. But then you're doing something which you're not in your comfort zone, so it may not be a self-directed thing. So all those, that's how life is. If you look at, if we just want to purely live with our passion, I think I love to do that. We can all do that. But then there are sometimes responsibilities, there are rules, there are restrictions, and there are commitments that we need to have community. So I think that self-organization and self-direction works much better than being, forcefully taught and being told what to do, right? That's other option, right? You're being constantly taught, and then you're being, ordered to do certain things. So I think that's where I find that balance in both.
Right. So a lot of emphasis is on life skills, how to live a life, joyfully or in your own way. You mentioned that parents also, adults can also be part of the community learning. How does that work?
Okay. Yeah. So as I told you, Bhoomi, we call them as Bhoomi Learning Community, which is for ages 7 and above, right?
Mm,
And for we can talk a little bit about 7 and below, but for me, one there a lot of those things can be taken up by anyone of any age. So example of adults being involved, there are people who are interested in. There's someone who's interested in making soaps, right? There's another person interested in mandala paintings. So they can also offer sessions, or they can just do things around, right? So they do, when they're in the community, they do those things, and then as a natural extension, people might find it interesting, and they also
mm,
join in and do things together, right? Sometimes hold sessions, right? The soap making, actually it started with two of the community members. I think both of them were initially interested in doing making, and they're both, and when they got together, something much beautiful happened. So if you look at a lot of the sessions, if we have much more classes and sessions for adults at Bhoomi than children, because the idea is that once, because most of the community members are parents and your children are coming in there, so once we learn, children will learn. But then trying to
mm,
teach a child to make soap may not be very interesting unless the child signs up for it, right? So even very less sessions at Bhoomi are mandatory for even adults.
mm.
So again, you sign up. So there's always that level of self-direction and self-organization that's happening. And our belief is that one, children are okay the way they are. It might find it. For me, I only need to work on myself if any change need to happen. And when I say it applies personally to me and anyone else. So the basic thing is that it's adults. We are the one who uh, need the most change, right?
Hmm.
And we are the one who needs most unlearning, let's call it that way, because children, they have less, just because of the number of years we are lived, not because we are some special species. Whereas children, they have more time to learn, they have more time to make mistakes, whereas we could very easily get set into our old ways, which sometimes work, and we know when it doesn't work, right? Because it's not, I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that what happens in our own schooling is the most beautiful experience in our life, right? Again, I'm not talking about the time that we spend now. I love my school time, right? I'm not complaining about that, but the process of learning, everything that we learned and how that applies to our life, we can all think about that. Was it all very relevant, right? For me, the biggest learning from my school for me was the friendship, how to deal with things, right? And I love some subjects. I loved biology, I loved maths, but I used maths very well. I still like it, but not all the complex things which I had to learn and try next time. I don't even know how that applies. Biology I love, but I think you know I don't have a great depth in knowledge on how exactly everything works now, even though I used to get good marks in biology.
Hmm.
So for me, I feel like, so if I were bored, I did not, because the school will keep you busy. That's a good part, right? Which sometimes works for and someone looking at what. But if I was bored when I was early on and I had to figure out my path early on, I think it would have been a different experience for me. Thankfully, I am still exploring that. So that's why I told you I have to unlearn at this point. So for me, the Bhoomi community is a great unlearning space for me. And then I get to meet people who are on the journey. We get to sometimes do things together, and even being on the show with you, I think it's all part of being part of that journey, even though I can never plan for it. So I think that's where self-direction, self-organization can guide us. That's
How many parents are engaged with you in the Bhumi community? Bachan?
I think we are close to 20 families right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened again, as I told you, we don't have any agenda as a community other than learning being the key focus and community. So if you look at the last 1.5 years was not the best time for community learning, right? When we are doing things, or one way, whereas it was a very great time for each family learning, right? And reflecting back on life. So I think for me, the last 1.5 years was beautiful in a different way, that we got to spend more time as family, and there was less opportunity for the community gatherings, right? We tried to do something online and all. So in that process, so automatically, since so because of all that, right now we are around 15-20 families, and we also have an intention to keep it very small, because the very word self-organization works only in smaller groups, because in larger group you automatically need to have some sort of a command and control structure, otherwise it can lead to chaos. So always
Hmm.
intention of Bhoomi community to have smaller communities that are self-organized and self-directed. So which means that at any point, if we have 30 or 40 families, they will think about how to, you know, not, how to structure in such a way that we operate as multiple communities in all practical ways. Right? So that's it.
How, if you could just tell us, how did you make this decision of, going into community learning and creating a community? What took you? What was the change? Uh, what changed you, or what made you take this decision?
Yeah, I think it's not just one thing, as I told you. So initially, so we were living in US. It's again mostly these are personal stories. I am not doing any of this to change the world, right? It's again to
Hmm.
change or learn and unlearn, and for solving practical day-to-day things that you face. So anyway, just to specifically answer that, so we were living in US and we decided to move to India. This was in 2015 and
Hmm.
2016, and we decided to move to a city that we don't know almost anyone, which is Cochin, because I spent my early childhood and schooling and college in Kerala, but that is in a different city, Trivandrum. So, and then I also spent some time in Bangalore. So we definitely had more friends in Bangalore and Kerala, Bangalore and Trivandrum than in Cochin. So we moved here, and obviously we had two children at that time. Right? So for us and for our children, we did not have a lot of friends. We had friends, right? But most of them were in other places. We had a couple of friends in Cochin. So that was the first reason. So we initially thought about unschooling or homeschooling our children. And at some point, we realized that okay, it doesn't really matter; they'll just grow along with us. So that it was not so much for the, the school reason that we started the community. So we started Bhoomi for creating or finding like-minded people in Cochin who would like to explore the journey together. So that was pretty much the reason. And then as we, explore that further, we went deeper into learning. And then when you come together, what do? You need to do something. So the learning by doing was the main theme. And then obviously, whenever people are involved, there is fun things. We celebrate a lot of festivals together, and that's how I can reflect back on. But if you ask me 5 years back, why did you start? No, I think we just start.
Hmm.
You start, you have to start doing. So we found, and again, when we started, we didn't know anyone in Cochin, so there was no. And then there was this is definitely not a commercial, or financial initiative, right? So there's not about enrolling this many number of people. It was more about bringing together people who are, somewhat like-minded, and then learning from each other. And thankfully, the journey is still continuing. So happy about. We are also in the process of setting up a new space, because we haven't had a physical space for the last 1.5 years,
Hmm.
and so we're in the process. That's in the process of setting up that. So good things happen. Sometimes taking a break is good. You get to, otherwise you will again automatically get into that, business as usual daily grind, and you don't think different. So we are moving to a space that's smaller, but still, having a lot more outdoor area. So it'll be, people can explore the nature and other things, which is always big part of learning, especially early on as a child, because you have to learn to be a Bhoomi or earth. That's the first thing that's most important.
Right. I've been to your space in Kerala Museum,
Mm.
and I was there when the carpentry workshop was going on.
Okay, okay.
And I met your facilitator over there, and we
Mhm.
had a conversation. And it was so beautiful to watch all the children playing, and some of them are interested in carpentry, the others are just running around,
Mhm.
playing,
Mhm.
having fun,
Mhm.
and they come back to the facilitator time and again to ask
Mhm.
different questions, and they run away. So that is what was happening, and it was such a joyful experience to just watch these children, work and fight and cheer together. Um, how how sustainable, or if suppose a community of parents, suppose 3-4 parents want to start this, how easy or difficult is it? I mean, it is always, it's, we want to take this decision, we want to do it. We want to put our children out of schools and maybe engage with them, but again, both the parents are working, or either one of us is working. How easy or difficult is it to continue this in a sustained format?
Again, when we say easy, difficult, first we have to think about what are we comparing it with, right? So again, we have to start with, whatever we are doing, how we see this difficult should be the first thing that each person has to reflect on, right? And there has to be a reason for the change. So for me, the journey has been beautiful, and there were things that was easy, there were things that were difficult, but for me that is just part of the journey, right? So when we started, we had a need, and as I told you, our difficulty was that we did not know anyone in Cochin, right? So that became an opportunity that, okay, how can we get people in Cochin? And our solution in this case was to start Bhoomi, but everyone doesn't need to do that way. You can also take time to get to know people in your area or community, or start building the community that way as well. So the process is same. So in 1 year, we got to know that there are around 10 other families who are interested in a similar journey, right? So then the other question, I don't know whether this was part of, because it's the financial part, right? So financially, we had to support the first year of Bhoomi, because we had a space, we had to hire people to be there. Again, now if I were to do it all over again, which I wouldn't get a chance, but then instead of thinking about that, now we are moving to a very different model, becoming more like a cooperative, where there is almost no financial transaction involved within the before. Now we had to collect money from people, whether we called fees or something else, and we had to pay rent, we had to pay people, right? So now the idea is that we come together more as a cooperative, and people who can spend time, that becomes your contribution to the community, right? And then people who cannot spend time, which is you're talking about the facilitators and all. So you don't, instead of hiring facilitators, we'll have parent volunteers as facilitators. We have a way of making sure that that's organized well. Again, it's part of self-organization. And then people who are not in a position to come, they will pay the rent towards the facilities, right? So we are going into a little bit more of a decentralized model, right? So again, to go back to your part, right? So the difficulty is in integrating and moving along this, along the adults together. As I told you, children are okay, they are fine, they don't need much. It's more about organizing, and that's something I thankfully still love to do, right? So I'm not very interested in running things, but I'm very interested in creating a space for everyone to run things together, right? So personally, this is just, so again, it's all about the individual and individuals involved, right? So for me, since I was not very interested in running things, and sometimes people think that I am the one running everything, so there has been some confusion around that, or some expectation. I think thankfully, as it would, we were able to clarify it. So we always have lots of open conversations or facilitate discussions on these topics. And I think around after that, by the third or fourth year, I felt like we all got to a space where we established a vision for Bhoomi. And I think 2019-20, it was somewhat clear that Bhoomi is not run by one person or two people. Everyone can participate, as long as you understand the guidelines, as you understand the vision. And hopefully the next few years will tell how we can really function. So it's possible in different ways, right? A lot of communities are sometimes started by one person and always run by one person. We can do it that way. Then there'll be more responsibility on one person, and others will share some part of the responsibility through money or time commitment. Or we can, it will take much more. Definitely takes much more time to run the community in the same way we want learning to happen. So my idea was to start the community in such a way that the community activities are also self-organized and self-directed, than being directed by one person or controlled by a small group. So that takes a little bit more time to settle down. It's not something that we are used to. All our systems are centralized systems, not just talking about schools. right? With most of the systems are centralized systems with a command and control approach. So I found that that's very inefficient, and there are other ways to operate. So that's one of the motives. So I have a personal motivation to do this, to explore other ways of working together as human beings. Let's put it that way.
Right. Thank you for that knowledge, because many parents and many communities, they kind of go on for some time and then they kind of get tired because people don't come together, or maybe just one person is going ahead and doing everything. So you kind of start losing the hope at some point in time. But this gives us hope that we can continue, in different formats as well. Bachan, one thing that I'm sure parents of older children, teenagers who are 16 or 18, they worry about are the board exams, or the exams which you have to qualify to get to college. What is your vision for children with Bhoomi? How do you see them growing up and doing college? And have systems changed in college as well?
Yeah. So again, I don't want any child. I'll answer the question from what I know, but on the question specifically
Right.
on, I do not want me to be holding the vision for any child at Boom, even for my daughter, right? Because I am not
Hmm.
one to decide that they should go to college or not, right? Because
Hmm.
that's first part, right? So now, in currently in India, if you are an child or an adult who wants to go back to college, it's possible. There is a option called as, and so only thing you need to go to college other than money and getting admission somewhere is having a 10th and 12th certificate, right? So that's the
Right.
so that option is available. I think it was originally started for adult education, something called as NIOS, and you
Mm-hmm.
can anyone can enroll for NIOS. You can write your 10th and 12th exam, and there's a wide subjects available. You can choose. That's currently, and I find that the education system overall is fast changing in India. So I think there should be much more options. And I also believe this. I am not sure. I also believe that most of the state syllabus you can register as a private candidate, which I have not validated, but that's my understanding. Without, whereas for NAOS, it's an option. So again, I'm not saying I don't hold vision for any child, because I think that's again either they have, it should be their parents' decision, or support by the community. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this option, and I know people who have gone through, with children who have gone through similar unschooling, homeschooling approach, and they have written these NOS exams. So that option is available if that certificate and going to college is important for any child or adult.
Right. I was going through your document, the Bhoomi profile, the community document, and it said at the top of the core idea was trust. And I see that a lot in your conversation also, that you trust the child, or you trust the member of the community with whatever is going to happen or unfold. Uh, but in your experience, do you
Yeah.
think that the child doesn't need a guide or a mentor, or somebody that he or she can look up to? Because we have been brought up in this whole system of role models. Teacher will tell you what to do, or somebody will show you the way. How do you address that as an individual and as a community member?
Sure. Okay. Let's we talked about the system. Okay. So I think it's not just a child. I think we all can benefit from having role models and people to look up to. And I personally feel that if it's more than one or many people, that's the best, because there's something you can learn from everyone, right? I don't think we need these big, you know, role models who are like. My point that personally, I would prefer to have many people who I can model, right, behavior, right from my children, to my wife, to people I interact with, right? And that's how that has been beautiful, much more beautiful for me, because most of the one role model I had, they always disappointed me at some time or the other. And again, this is just, I'm talking as an adult, right, having lived my life this much. Now for a child, I think they need to have role models. So it's again, school is not where you get all these, I believe, right? You don't need, my point, that you don't need to have textbooks, let's call it that, right? You don't need to have textbooks and classrooms to uh, be there always to create these needs. So those needs that you told are absolutely needed. I think for me, as I told you, the one of the main reasons why we decided to start Bhoomi and still believe in Bhoomi is that the village is missing. So what I meant by the village is that there are people in real life on different age level, right? Grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, interacting with you at a meaningful level, not just buying you candy or giving you a phone to watch TV,
Right.
but treating
Right.
you as a adult, right? So that's the whole intention with Bhoomi, is to hold that space, so that as you told, the trust in the child, and obviously the trust in the adult, that's an important part. Being mindful as a community member is very important part. So once you create that foundation, we all rise up to a potential. Other day someone was saying, I think this was a school in Dehradun, it's called Nanni Dunia or something, and the only qualification for joining there is that it was some told in Hindi, so I'm not very good at Hindi. So it was something, the fact that we want the Yashodas to be the teachers,
Mm.
right? Because the point is that, okay, every child or every one of us has a Krishna in us, or as a
Mm.
is on the path to self-realization, right? So, and if you look at Yashoda, was not constantly teaching him, was letting Krishna, from what we know, being naughty as much as you want. So I think
Mm.
the whole idea is that I think we need people to be available for these children. We need them to be around. As you told, right, you saw the children running up to facilities, asking when things they want. So if we can grow
Mm.
up in that environment, as you grow up, as you get your, as a child becomes 15, 18 years old, they have this group of adults they can trust, they can be with. And then obviously there is a specific age when the mentoring and role models are important for a child. That's not when you're 7 or 8, because that time you're happily playing, you have your parents take care of you. If you look at the
Mm.
14 or 15 to 18 or 19, that's when you feel there's a typical what we call as the teenage rebellion, right?
Mm.
No, when they're rebels, and then we all went through. It's not because of that. That's where you want to connect with other people. So that is all internally driven. We don't need to force and place role models around. We will find, we will seek, right? And we just need to have people available, again, that a group or a community with adults who have different skill set available, so that you can who to go and talk to, who to
Mhm.
get help for a life skill. And I think that's the beauty. And again, all this doesn't have to be facilitated. Some of them happens organically. So then
Mhm.
we feel like, instead of spending more time facilitating learning through the books or teaching through books, we can facilitate the environment. And then books are not a bad thing. When the learner is ready, a book,
Mhm.
YouTube video, internet, all those are beautiful tools. But that's not
Mm.
just to pass the maths exam. You might pass the maths exam as a byproduct of it, but that is to genuinely pursue their need. Right?
Mhm.
So,
So there are lots of pedagogies that have been built on this ideology, or similar ideologies, like the Waldorf or the Montessori to an extent. Um, so, uh, is there a Bhumi pedagogy, or do you follow, or do you mix, or how is it? I mean, is there a route that you follow?
yeah, so none of this what I'm talking about is, I did not invent, discover, or any of that. These are things from, from pretty much I learned most of this from people, not from book even. And I don't read much. I read very few things. I sometimes read the same book over and over again, because that gives me enough knowledge. Whereas I
Mm.
visited lots of spaces, right? So there is this whole movement called as self-directed learning, right? And under that, there are different approaches. There's one is called as democratic schools, which
Mhm.
and there are some of them. I've visited few schools in different countries, right? And again, the first time I went into a school and democratic schools, there is again, it's pretty much what we're talking about, right? Children come in, there are adults there, and they're not even focused on even trying to facilitate learning. You come and you go. You just have to follow the basic rules so that you don't, impact the whole space, right? So there are so I was very shocked, and even though I've read about all this, I remember in 2016 I went to a school in San Francisco area, and then I was not sure, but then eventually we created something very similar. So again, the point is that there is something called as democratic schools, and then there is a whole movement going on which has been around for quite a few years called as unschooling movement, which is again
Yeah.
self-directed learning, but there is it's literally no, and that's sometimes called deschooling. Unschooling is there
Mm.
is not even an attempt to teach a child. You just learn, and then if they ask to be taught. And then there is something which has recently come up called as agile learning centers,
Okay.
which is a little bit more into facilitating the learning space. So
Mm.
somehow, and I was also I do training and coaching in agile, which is a whole different story to say, maybe on the show. So I do that. So I automatically started using those practices in 2018 at Bhoomi Learning Community. But in 2019, I discovered that it's all written down as what's called as Agile Learning Centers. So now, if you ask me, Agile Learning Center is something that based on a lot of the Bhoomi principles, or some of them are based on Agile Learning Centers. But then we incorporate different things. So our whole idea is that once you are okay with the basic part of self-organization and self-direction, then you can not follow any syllabus. You can follow a syllabus. You can follow yourself. You can follow someone, right? As long as once you're in the environment, children are always curious to learn. Even adults are curious to learn. It's just that sometimes we need to give ourselves time. So
Right.
that's pretty much
So, democratic schools and agile learning centers
mm,
are something that
right.
maybe our parents who are watching
Sure.
could check out
Mm,
and see
mm,
and explore further.
mhm.
Um, all right. So, I have been to Bhumi, as I told you, and I've seen children over there, and I've also performed for a few children over there. So, how important do you think performance arts or drama or music or dance is important for the overall development of children generally, not just for Bhumi, but generally? And how do you bring that into your community? Do you have parents who are dancers or storytellers or theater people who come and share their experiences with the children?
Yeah. So how important, my answer should be it's very important, but then I don't know, right? The child will, if it's important, the child will figure it out, right? And will ask for it. So that's one part of the answer. So I think the correct answer should be it's very important, right? But then for me, that maybe if that's important, then that'll be, somehow we should create the space so that what's important can easily be explored or requested, right? So that's one thing. Second thing, yes, at Bhumi we always again, the world is the teacher, the world is our forum, right? So we always have people visit Bhumi, especially when we were you know having a space and things were even right now online. We also, I requested you to come in and do something for adults again. So it's
Mm.
very important, and we make sure that we have that space open for people to come in and explore what they. So most of the learning for the community, whether it's adults or children, happen because of people already exploring that. So right,
Mm.
so that always happens, right? Other than even, and obviously we do some of that for the fun events, dancing and all, but we have people who come in and do theater shows, right? Self-expression workshops. One of the community member, she's into art-based healing, art-based therapy, right? And then
Mm.
whenever people travel, so I actually happen to, when I've traveled a lot of countries, as you mentioned, actually I had very close interaction with more people after being from different countries after being at Bhumi, because we have volunteers always coming from various countries. They spend time at Bhumi, they stay with us. We have some beautiful friends we develop. So, but when that this is possible, this doesn't have to be, you don't need to have any special skills to have any of these opportunities, because I did not plan any of that. We just need to be open and give ourselves more time to explore the world, right? And through that, our children will hopefully learn what they want to learn. If they don't learn now, they'll learn later.
Right. Right. All right, if we can have some of our audience members come in and with your questions, we'll be very happy to take it. Take the questions, your comments. I have a question which is from a parent who is considering a shift from a mainstream school into homeschooling or community learning, and she's really scared with the fact that she wants to get into it, but she feels disabled as an educator because she's a banker. I mean, she knows basic maths, basic English, basic science, uh, but she's worried that if she pulls her child out, uh, then she might have to send her to tuition centers or other places to learn. So the whole thing comes back to square one. So if there's anything that you can say to help her, I've got this question on WhatsApp on my number, and if you could just talk about it a little.
No, I think if you are scared of something, then you're probably about to do something right. That's what's scaring you, right? So one thing, give yourself time. If you want to be scared with that for maybe a year, don't give up. That's the thing, right? So I think solutions will come to you. Right now, if you want to homeschool your child and if you want to teach your child everything, then I'm saying you're going to sign up for too much. That's it's quite a task, right? Whereas again, now if I were to advise you, would be that either consider you know unschooling, right? Uh, the other options, if you do homeschooling, be ready to have the child deal with the learning part and come to you for whenever teaching is needed, right?
Mm.
Right. So that's the other third option is to find a group or community, not just online, right? Who have who has support for some of this mechanism, right? Again, I think if we're talking about teaching the syllabus, I believe the schools are doing the best they can, right?
Mm.
And we try and do that. You can do it if you have the luxury of time, right? But not trying to have that happen and then you have your child go to 25 tuition centers. I doubt, at least if you go to a school, then they'll at least have a group of people to work with, find the school that's the I would say less strict or something. Otherwise, like, so be with it and connect with people. I think the first step is, before you make any big decision, connect with other people, because I am if I am doing this all myself without having any conversation, it's difficult, because it's not what I went through. It can be very challenging, and you can definitely doubt yourself. So none of this, when you say easy or difficult, everything is easy and difficult. It's matter of, please connect with people, reach out to communities, talk to people, find young adults who are 18, 20. They have so there are a lot of people in India who have not gone to school. There are people who are did things at home. So talk to them, and you'll get a lot of solutions. As I told you, I learned everything from meeting people, and some I understood, some I misunderstood, but it's part of life.
All right. Vishakha is asking, are there aspects of community learning that normal, regular schools can adopt?
Absolutely. For me, everything that we're talking about, any community can. So school is a community. Just that there's not enough time for that level of interaction, right? So yeah. So the best thing is to a lot of things can be done. And if anyone is interested, I'm personally because I love what I'm doing. I thankfully don't keep myself too busy. So I am definitely ready to have a. So the answer to the simple answer that is yes, but there has been openness uh, from from the school, but it's possible.
All right. I don't see any other questions coming up. So I think that's about it. We had a very, very thorough discussion, I think, at a very short time. Thank you, Bachan, for making it so quick and so clear. Any last ideas or thoughts that you would like to share before we close today's session?
No, thanks for I think your questions were some of I've never tried to answer all these questions myself. So I hope I did. I was just being honest. So yeah, thanks for the questions. I'm glad that people are exploring other ways, just as I am doing it. And I think the main thought is that, trust the child, which I have to. The reason I want telling is I have to remind myself. So I think that's the most important part. And then trust yourself. And then if you're doing something different, you'll be scared, and that means you're trying to do something right. Right. I think those are things which if I find that it's sometimes things are too easy, and sometimes I go in the too easy mode if I'm just
Hmm.
going with the flow, and sometimes it's good. But then when my life is flowing versus going with the flow, I find that okay, when there is flowing, there's always growth. So I think,
Right. Flow is good. Thank you. On that note, Bachan, I thank you for joining us this evening, and everybody, whoever is watching. Okay, Shalini has just come in with a comment. It's intermingling of different aspects, really unique and amazing. So thank you, Shalini, for that comment. With that, we come to an end of our conversation. Please do like, share, and subscribe this channel. We try and bring in people from different walks of life who have tried new things, who have discovered new things in their journey, and we continue to create and grow this community as much as we can. Thank you, Bachan, and see you soon in Kerala.
thank you, thanks everyone, bye.
Bye.